Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another Visit NC webinar. This webinar is being recorded. It will be available on our partners page. We'll have it up this afternoon. As always with these webinars, we're going to present some information and then you can ask questions in the questions tab on the right-hand side of your screen. We will answer them at the end. If you are calling in, you can always email a question to guy.gaster, guy.gaster @visitnc.com. We'll answer them at the end of the program. So welcome everybody. Today we're going to talk about a couple of different things. We've got our good friend John Loyack, who's here from the Economic Development Partnership. He's going to talk about a grant that Commerce has. It's called a MURR grant, and it probably will not be an impact for you as a DMO, but it will be good for businesses that are in your area that have been forced to close during the pandemic. So John's going to give the details on that. I'm going to talk about our tourism recovery grant and our second wave. We're going to a second wave of that grant. But first, I'm going to kick it off with a little bit of our research. As you all know, we've done weekly tracking of American travelers to get inside their heads and figure out where they are as it relates to traveling during the pandemic. So the latest results are in, and while we're making progress in some areas, we've slipped back in several areas as well. This is I think probably the best overview chart. It's expectations of whether the pandemic will get better or worse. Worse is the orange and better is the blue. As we've seen all along, the media is essentially driving these perceptions, and we've seen a lot of stories about a fall wave, the third wave, or another fall comeback of the virus. And with that, a lot of people are thinking it's going to get worse before it gets better. So obviously that's not ideal. This shows, this is up even from last week, that almost 3/4 of the people think it's likely that this second wave is going to hit and hurt us all as we head into the winter season. So what does that really mean for holiday travel? We asked people probably for the first time to talk about holiday travel and what their plans were. Now, last year, almost about 50% of the people said they were going to travel for the holidays. This year, obviously, it is much reduced. And it's interesting. It's not just any one holiday. They're all going to be reduced by a lot. So Christmas is probably going to take the biggest beating, but Thanksgiving a significant drop as well. And then things like New Year's and Halloween. Just fewer people traveling for these holiday seasons. That's their plan. Why? Mostly COVID. People aren't happy flying because of COVID. We're also seeing a little bit of an increased financial issues for people as no more stimulus has come out. Some of these unemployment programs have been diminished or people are running out of their eligibility. There's also increased concern over our national economy as well. So these are all reasons why fewer people will be traveling this winter. So obviously, I think we need to stick with our guns and continue to try and get those people that are traveling to travel in a safe way. Where we have, I think, made some improvement, and I think this is really important, as we keep seeing more and more people comfortable going out in their own communities, which is the first step to taking trips. It's also the first step to welcoming people into their communities, and then that continues to grow despite the increases in the second wave and all that talk. So I think that's really good. Another really good sign is people are comfortable seeing ads promoting their areas more and more, even despite the negativity. So that's really good. So those are the areas where we're making progress. We want to make people as comfortable as possible when it comes to this. And this is really the reason. And as you'll see, this is a word cloud that was done The first one in the top left was done in March when this thing first started, and it was, what's the one word you associate with travel right now? And it was fear. We were dealing with fear in March. We're dealing with fear in October. It's a little better. There are some, there's some good, there's some cautious, there's some ready, happy, but we still see a lot of fear. So we've got to deal with that fear in order to get people to be comfortable traveling. And I think the Count on Me NC program is designed to do that. It's designed to get people to start thinking, okay, how can we do this safely? How can we do this in a way that's not going to get us sick and that we don't have to be afraid of? So we'll continue with those efforts through the end of the year. And that's what we're really seeing from a research front. Now next, we've got our good friend, John Loyack. He's the VP for Global Business Services for the EDPNC. And his team really works with existing industry businesses that are out there across the state, trying to help them grow and be successful. John is a good friend of ours and has spoken before. And he's going to talk about a program that Commerce is running that I think could be very beneficial for some of your partners. Welcome, John.
Thank you, Whit. It's a pleasure to be here. And I don't know who that young guy is in that photo, but he did not know about COVID when that picture was taken.
He's a good-looking guy.
So if we could, we'll go straight into the slides. Whit's asked me to come in today to talk a little bit about a program that we are promoting on behalf of the North Carolina Department of Commerce. So within the North Carolina Department of Commerce, you all know the Visit NC team very well. We've also got a recruiting team that's bringing in new business. But the teams that I support work with businesses across the state, small businesses who are trying to start up, existing industry, particularly manufacturers all over the state, and anyone engaged in any level of international trade. But this is something that's extremely important to businesses as well, because we've never seen anything like this. And so the Mortgage Utility and Rent Relief Program is a program from the Department of Commerce, the North Carolina Department of Commerce, and it launched on Friday, October 2nd. So it is up, it's running, and it's available. And I'd like to share a little bit of information about it for you today. The next slide will show us that there are some very, very specific businesses that this applies to. This applies to businesses that have been through some kind of catastrophic or extraordinary business disruption. They've been closed down. This is something that no one anticipated, and this is, the state's response to helping some of them, with some of the costs that they've incurred over this period, and a way to get them some additional funding. This is not a grant. It's not a loan. This is structured as a direct payment to keep paperwork at a minimum. So this is something that's designed to benefit businesses in a number of different ways. So it is something that's been made available as a result of the coronavirus relief funds that have come to us from federal partners. And at this point, there's $40 million that have been assigned to this. It is available on a first come, first served basis. And if we burn through that 40 million very quickly, we do know we can go back to our General Assembly and share the results and ask for additional funding. So it is one that, what I would tell the businesses that you all support, it's something to, if you're interested, if you think you qualify, go ahead and take a look at this application process as quickly as you can. It is first come, first serve. There is a cap on the available funds, but don't worry if we burn through this 40 million right away. One of the things that is interesting about it is it could potentially benefit, more than one business, a business that has more than one location. I think that's an interesting piece to it as well. This slide will give you a sense of who is eligible for this. And as I said, this is very, very specific. I don't think there's any question about what a bowling alley is. I think that is one that is very clear. And so bowling alleys and dance halls are certainly ones that have not been able to operate. You haven't been able to get anybody into those businesses. And so it is designed to impact them directly. But then there's a lot of fine print in here in terms of what businesses it actually does support. It does support amusement arcades, but not a gambling establishment. It does support amusement parks, but not aquariums or wild animal parks or arboreta. And so there are very, very specific businesses that are considered eligible and those that are not. Bars are included in this. Bars, we all know, have been closed down, but it doesn't cover brewery tap rooms or restaurants with bars. So these are all some of the things that we wanted to share. Another perfect example, movie theaters. Obviously, they have not been open. Drive-ins have. So movie theaters are considered eligible. Drive-ins are not. But again, this is for certain for-profit businesses that have experienced some kind of significant business disruption in that they haven't been able to operate. So anyone who is told that they cannot operate should take a look at this. So this next slide gives you a glimpse of what you might be available for, what you might qualify for. It's based on 4 months of rent or mortgage interest and utility costs at an eligible business, and it's got to be for payments that you've made from April to August of 2020. That's it. And so anyone who would qualify for any of these particular categories, could certainly be included in this. One of the things that I've taken a lot of questions on is from businesses who say, well, hey, what if I've paid more than the cap in rent alone? Do I need to submit all of these things? The answer is no. If you've paid more than the cap in rent, that $20,000, then that's all you need to submit as part of the application process. So this just gives you a sense of what things could be covered. This slide gives you an idea of what would not be included. And so anyone who has already gotten funds, something like the PPP program, for example, and you've used that funding to cover your rent during that period or your utilities, you wouldn't be able to use the MURR funding for that as well. It doesn't disqualify you, but you can't use the same bucket of funds or 2 different bucket of funds to cover the same expense that you might have had. But as we go through this is just to give you a sense of the types of things that businesses are going to have to be prepared to share information on and other things that they've got to do. Next slide will take us through a little bit of, these are the types of things that I like to let businesses know about, because things that could certainly get someone to, this could change the mind of somebody who is considering the program. Number one, the application is subject to state public records laws. We're dealing with funds that are coming from the state, even though it's ultimately from a federal partner. And so it's certainly potential, just like we saw with the PPP program, company names and the amounts they've received could be disclosed to media requests. The other very interesting twist to this is that we're asking businesses to certify that they expect to continue to operate the business even after the COVID period. So if this is someone who is thinking about closing the business down in the next 30 days because of what they've experienced over the last 6 months, they need to be aware of this. Anyone that participates in the program, being that you're working with the state, you will have to complete a W-9 form. That's standard for anyone who's considered a vendor of the state. There is an attestation portion where they're going to have to attest that they know what these funds will be used for, and that they're very specific things that it can and cannot pay for. It can't pay for existing debts or tax liens or judgments or collections, but it certainly can be used to cover the categories that I mentioned earlier. And finally, as with a lot of these programs, any payment that comes in is counted as taxable income. So one thing I will say overall, I think for any of you who are thinking about businesses that need to be aware of this, what I would tell you right away is we're going to share some information. We've got a presentation that's available here, but For anyone who's interested and wants to take a look at this program right away, I would direct you immediately to the North Carolina Department of Commerce website. If you were to look up ncommerce.com/MURR, you'll find the page that has all the information. I think the Department of Commerce has done a fantastic job of putting up a variety of FAQs, information about the application process, ways to reach out for questions via email. There are videos that walk people through the application process so that they can see what's going on. And the process itself is very interesting too, because it's a 3-step process. It's one that helps businesses right away rather than fill out a full application. When some of the SBA EIDL programs and the PPP program and others, everyone was filling them in, only to learn maybe 30 to 60 days later that they didn't qualify. Maybe the application wasn't completed and things like that. We've created this 3-step process to kind of get folks through this in a different way. And so phase 1 is just kind of this base application where folks can walk through and see, here's the eligibility, and here's what expenses you'll need to prepare to explain as a part of phase 2. Phase 2 takes a look at all those expenses that someone is claiming for each of their locations, and then walks them through that. Finally, in phase 3, they upload the forms, and so we're getting through this process, step by step, rather than having everyone submit everything at once. Maybe they don't include everything they need. Maybe there's some kind of mistake with the application, and so it just makes it a little bit easier for them to get through it. So it just gives you a little bit of a sense of how that works. The next slide will show us the type of information that everyone applying for this program is going to need. They're going to need their Secretary of State ID. They're going to need their employer identification number. They'll need the front page of their tax return that shows their NAICS code, because the NAICS code is what's going to tell us what type of business this is. Any of the documentation about their lease, their mortgage, their utility obligations. If you had maybe you can't find your utility bill from the previous month, but you've got one from January. That'll give a sense of what the expenses will look like. And then, of course, final bullet there says, any evidence of previous payments that have been made is the easiest way to give folks a sense of what you'd be able to apply for as a part of this program. Actually, there's one slide before this guy. Maybe no. Okay. I guess we left one out. But again, I just wanted to mention. I'll just reiterate again that there is a lot of this information is available on the Commerce website. The application can be found there. A sample application is available there as well. You can, as part of part 1, you provide all that general information, and then part 2, you get an email back saying, okay, here's what we need to do next, and additional detail on the expenses will be needed to submit it. And then you're not complete. You're not complete until both of those parts are done. I will say, I think the Department of Commerce has done a great job of rolling this out very quickly. There is no deadline on this. They are going to be accepting applications as long as funding is available. And even beyond that, I have a feeling that even when they run out of funding, they'll continue to accept applications and go back to the General Assembly to see if there might be additional funding available. I think the videos and the website are probably the best thing that we can share with folks who might qualify for this. But for anyone who is impacted, meaning they haven't been able to open their businesses, and we know that there's a lot of folks in our community that have been affected this way, anyone from April to August who wants to figure out some way to be provided some kind of relief for their mortgage payments, their utility payments, their rent payments, this is the program that they should consider. Final point just to kind of highlight again is, even if you have applied for a PPP if you have received the PPP loan in the past, it is something that can still be used. Can't be used for the same expenses, but can be used to help. So that's just a little bit of information on that. In Whit, I think we're gonna maybe I know we've got a couple of other things to cover off on, but I'll be available for any questions.
Sounds great. Thanks a lot, John. We appreciate that. It is a great program. There's, in case you missed some of that, John's presentation is one of the handouts that we have today. The other handout is on what I'm going to cover now, starting now. So we are going to talk about our next phase, which is tourism funding grants. So we've done 2 programs this year, as many of you know. The first one was our marketing credit program. That was not a grant, that was giving you credit in our co-op, and we expanded that co-op based on the $15 million that we had received in CARES Act funds. Happy to say that we awarded $5 million in credits to partners across the state. 138 partner organizations participated from 82 of our state's 100 counties. It was great to see that we had a lot of tier 1, tier 2 counties participate as well. So those are all in, and now it's just a matter of executing those programs by December 30th. So that's going on. We're really happy with that. The second program we had was an actual grant. This was other funding that came from the CARES Act that was done in conjunction with the NC Travel Industry Association. They had worked to get these dollars available to DMOs across the state. It was $1.5 million. We did a wave of those grants, and we awarded about 60 of those. But we still have about half those funds left. So we're going out with a second wave that's going to start today of this tourism recovery grant. So I'm going to spend some time going over what it means, what it does not mean. So, okay, once again, this tourism recovery grant is designed, was put in the legislation to provide relief to areas in the state the most dependent on tourism to assist with tourism promotion. So it's a promotion grant. They wanted us to provide distribution of grants in consultation with the NC Travel Industry Association based on the area's tourism dependence. So who's eligible for it? You have to be a destination marketing organization across the state. This isn't for regional groups. It's not for attractions, restaurants, hotels. It's really for the DMOs to give them a little bit of the marketing oomph that they've lost, or to help reimburse them for things that they've done because of COVID. The first round, if you remember, they were $30,000 or $25,000, or they were $15,000 or $10,000 grants. This round, they will be $30,000 for counties that are in more tourism-dependent areas, $25,000 for counties that are in less tourism-dependent areas. So what's the timeline? It opens today. You can go to that site I've got listed there. It's our partner site, and you go to tourism promotion grants, and you will see the information there on them. And down at the bottom, there's a link to fill in the application. The applications must be submitted no later than October 30th. And of course, because this is CARES Act, the programs have to run by December 30th. Okay, I'm going to cover some of the details on these. So this is different than our credit program and the funds we got there, which were designated for promoting safe and travel that does not reintroduce the pandemic. These, they have 3 rules they have to abide by. The first rule these have to abide by is that they are necessary expenditures incurred during the public health emergency with respect to the COVID. So in other words, it has to be something you had to do because of COVID, or that you've done because of COVID. This is not to reimburse you for something you do every year or you would have done anyway. They can't be used for that. This has to be something that relates to COVID. Doesn't necessarily have to say, hey, it's COVID. It just has to be something you did because of COVID, something marketing wise. It also has to be something that wasn't accounted for in the budget, most recently approved as of March 27, 2020. So if you put an ad in our travel guide every year, you can't put that ad in our travel guide and pay for it out of this grant. It has to be something different. Or it has to be something that was substantially changed by COVID-19, substantially meaning more than 50% changed If you've got any questions about that, talk to us later, and we can hopefully guide you through that. But these really are for things that you did as a response to COVID, not things you had planned to do all along during the year. And then the last thing really is the deadline. This is things that were occurred between March 1st and December 30th, not December 31st, December 30th. So this can apply to things you've already done. If you in March, April, May, June did something different, did something new, did something because of COVID that was marketing, this can apply to that. So it doesn't have to be things you're doing between now and December 30th. It can be things you've already done. And you can get reimbursed for doing that, and then take the funds you originally used for doing that and do something else with them and do whatever you want with them. So those are the real big rules on it. How do you sign up? You go to the partners.visitnc page, go under tourism promotion grants. You'll have a web form in there. You're going to have to provide documentation of negative impact of COVID-19. If you've already participated in the first wave of these grants, you've done that. You don't have to do that again, or you can send us the exact same information. But what we really want to see there is we need to see that you've had some negative impact. It can be your occupancy tax from March and April. It can be your budget and a reduction in your budget as compared to last year. Just something that shows that negative impact. Then next, you're going to have to provide a bunch of documentation that the feds want. You're going to have to give contact information, your employee identification number, answer some questions about whether you're a woman-owned, minority-owned, veteran-owned, that kind of stuff that the federal government requires for any type of grant that it uses. And then the third thing you're going to have to do is show your planned use for the grant. Now, this is where 2/3 of the grants that we got in the applications for the first wave got kicked back to people, because this planned use really has to include those 3 details that I talked about that show that this, whatever you plan to do, fits in with the requirements of the CARES Act. So I'm going to show you an example, and we've actually got a copy of this as one of the handouts of something you can do, the way you could phrase this to help this pass the requirements of the CARES Act. This is an example I've stolen from one of our partners and kind of made it generic, but this is what we want to see. We want to see a plan for how you are going to spend it or how you have spent it in ways that make sense. So you'll see the first part here. This essentially repeats what the feds want to hear, that these are necessary expenditures incurred during the public health emergency, that they were not accounted for in the most recent budget, and that they were incurred between March 1st and December 30th. Those are the exact lines that they want, because that says that, hey, whatever I'm going to do, it fits in with the grant. It's important to do that. And then when you get into the details on what you're specifically doing with this, it doesn't hurt to repeat it. So, you know, every one of these things I'm doing or that I've done, if I did it in the past, I got a videographer over the summer and we shot some new video that showed safe ways for people to visit our community. We did that in June and July. You're showing that it's something different, it's related to the COVID, and it'll be completed by December 30th. It's very important that you have that in this detail so that it can pass through the grants. Those are the keys. Another thing it can be for that we haven't talked about is it can be for PPE, for masks and things like that. If you bought them with your logo on them, or if you want to buy them from Visit NC, you know, we have Count on Me NC masks available. You can buy them and you can be reimbursed as part of this program, because that is essentially marketing collateral. Now, the way you're going to want to say it in here is not, we went out and bought PPE. It's, we went out and bought marketing collateral that was PPE, and we were doing marketing with it. We had our logo on it. We had the Count on Me NC logo on it. We had things that promote safe travel during the pandemic. So those are the important things you can do with it. It's a great program. As I said, we hope to spend all the money we can and get it spent out and get it back in your hands, hopefully to help you guys get going again. And now we'll move on to questions. And I can't find the questions on my screen. So Guy, maybe you'll read us the questions.
Happy to help out with the first question. If you did not secure funds in round one, assuming this is the grant program, but are applying for funds in round two, is it possible to secure what you were going to have in round one and round two?
If you mean the dollar amount is going to be fixed. So the dollar amount for round two is 30,000 if you're in a more tourism dependent county. You cannot get 45 in this round. It would be 30 in this round.
Okay.
If you need to know whether you're in a more tourism dependent county or a less tourism dependent county, that information is also in the on the tourism recovery grant page on the partner site.
All right. Next question. How soon can we expect to receive these funds? Again, this looks to be to the grant program.
Yep. So the way the process works is if you qualify, we will send you back a contract that you have to sign and some forms that you're going to have to fill out monthly that go to the Pandemic Recovery Office. We're going to need your W-9 and we're going to need your banking routing information. If you guys send that and sign the contract, send it back to us with the W-9 and the bank routing information, we will be able to wire you the money the next week. So takes probably about a week once you're qualified for it to get the funds.
And John, same question for you, your understanding with the MURR program. When would recipients be able to expect receiving those funds?
So we've just kind of kicked that off, so I would say it's hard to tell right now, but if I were to compare this to the job retention grant program that Commerce did back at the end of July, that was an application that ran for the month of August. They spent September reviewing over 500 applications, and funds are being dispersed now, so it can be done relatively quickly.
Great, thanks. Good question here, kind of mixing programs, but a great idea. Whit, can the grant program funds be used for creating collateral that is for the marketing credit program?
Yes, they most definitely can be. They can be used for creating collateral for that. They can be used for creating collateral that's in our regular co-op. If you were not planning on joining our co-op in March, in the budget you had in March, they can be used for that as well, and it's a great use for them. They can be used for hiring agencies to do that work for you. They cannot be used to pay your staff to do that work, unfortunately. That is one of the few restrictions we have. It's not an employment grant, so they can't be used for paying your own staff, but they could be used for hiring an outside agency to do either marketing, advertising, or PR.
Very good. Our next question on the grant. If you were approved for funds in round one, can you ask for more money for the same program in round two?
Yes, you can. Some people submitted sort of $30,000 programs during round one when all we could give them was 15. You can resubmit that and ask for the full amount to be awarded to you.
Great, and sorry to leave you out, John, but lots of questions here on the grant. With clarification, can the money be used for a project that a DMO would like to do, or does it just have to be used for programs that are already paid for?
It can be used for something that you want to do as long as you do it by December 30th. Because what's going to happen is once you get this money, you're going to have to turn in an invoice every month to show that you spent that money. And if you haven't spent that money by December 30th on what you said you were going to spend it on, the federal government is going to come back and ask for that money back. So I think it's a little easier to use it to reimburse you for things you've already done, but it's definitely possible if there are other things you want to do and you can do them by December 30th, you can most definitely use this program for that kind of thing.
If you were approved for funding in round 1 of the grants, do you have to expend all of that before you can apply for round 2?
No, you do not. It's completely independent.
John,
sorry, for those of you who were approved in round 1, our next webinar, we're going to talk about filling out the C1 and the C2 forms and those monthly reports that you have to do to the Pandemic Recovery Office, and talk about how those are going to be done and how it works. We just filled out our first set this month, so I wanted us to go through it and figure out how it worked before we talk to you guys about it.
The next question has to deal with the December 30th deadline. So the first part is, if the work is not completed by then, do the funds have to be reimbursed?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. If you don't have an invoice that says you spent those funds by December 30th, not December 31st for some strange reason, if you haven't spent those funds and don't have that invoice showing that by December 30th, anything after that is not going to be covered and not going to be counted, and you will have to refund that money.
And that has to be invoiced and completed, correct? Can a DMO show progress towards completion?
It has to be completed. So what I would say is, if you're paying an agency to do something, pay them to do the job by December 30th. If they haven't completed it by December 30th, I don't think anyone's going to know that, nor do you need to say that. But as long as you've made that payment for that work that was supposed to be completed by December 30th, if they don't get it done by then, I don't think the audit is going to dig that deeply into how that's worked. The main thing is that you've paid for it to be done by December 30th.
Great. And John, on the MURR program, is there a must use by date like there is with this marketing grants program?
There is not. It's something that's being applied to expenses that were already incurred. So our sense is that when the money comes into your account, you'll be using it. Yeah, once you get clearance on what the eligible costs were that you've incurred, you're fine.
With the second round of the recovery grant, will applications be emailed out like round 1, and/or will the application be available on the partners page?
Okay, they will not be emailed out like round 1. They will just be available on the partners page. So we will send out a notice with a link in NewsLink. Actually, I'm sorry, not in NewsLink, but we will send out a link to partners who are eligible. But I'd say the best way to go is go to partners.visitnc.com. Down on the menu on the left, down at the bottom, it'll say Tourism Recovery Grant. Go in there, and at the bottom of the page, there's a link to the application.
Great, thanks. There was a clarification in regards to the purchase of PPE using grant funds. If a DMO does that, is the assumption that is approved in as much as they're labeled as marketing materials?
Yeah, so here's the deal. This is a promotional grant. So it's for you to do promotions. So I believe that promotional items are part of that. And so, you could buy t-shirts, you could buy other things, but one of the things you could buy are masks. So it's my belief, and so far this has worked, that if you buy promotional items that are masks, that are PPE, those would qualify. If you just bought, if they have your logo or they're sending your marketing message, that way they're marketing promotional items, they just happen to be PPE as opposed to a t-shirt or a pen or a snow globe or something. If you put in an invoice for PPE, I don't think that will qualify. So I think a lot of it comes down to explaining the case and how this is a marketing effort and not a health and safety effort, which those funds would come from different grants. So what I would say is, yes, you can do it, but you need to do it as a promotional item that happens to be PPE and not PPE.
Very good. Good question here, seeking kind of clarification. If in round one you were essentially available for $30,000 and you only applied and were awarded $25,000, does that mean for round two you can only apply for $5,000, or is round two you're available for the full amount again?
Yeah, no, it's essentially a reset. So if you're in a high dependence, one of the 50 high dependent counties, you're eligible for $30,000. And if you're in one of the lesser dependent counties, the other 50, you're eligible for $25,000. The first round doesn't play into it.
And sorry to have you repeat, but it's popped up again.
Yeah.
Agency fees in creation of promotional material is a qualified expense?
I would say promotional items that are PPP are qualified expenses. PPE in general that is not a promotional item is not a qualified expense.
Sorry, that might not have come out right. Agency fees.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you said PPE. Agency fees for work that are done that fit all three of the equations. So they were not in your original budget. They were done specifically because whatever activity, whatever you're paying them for is being done due to COVID, and it's been done between March 1st and December 30th. That is eligible as if it's promotional. If it's an agency, they're doing something to promote you, but it has to fit those other requirements. So you can't just pay your agency bill with this grant for them to do what you had already planned for them to do. If they've done anything additionally above and beyond what you had in your original budget that was due to COVID, that yes is applicable and you qualify for it.
Great. Remind us where DMOs can go to see what tier they are for the grant levels.
Yep. So it's all in the same spot. If you go to the partners.visitnc.com page, on the left-hand side, there's a menu down there. You go down to the bottom, it'll say Tourism Recovery Grant. Click on that and you'll go to that page, and there'll be a paragraph there explaining what those counties are. And there's a little link in there. You click it and it'll show you which 50 are most tourism dependent and which 50 are less tourism dependent. That was done by dividing the amount of sales, taxable sales done by visitors as opposed to total taxable sales. So it's basically the 50 counties that have the most of their spending comes from visitors. Those are considered the most dependent.
Great. In terms of reporting, two-part question. Number one, where should someone go if they have questions? I guess this is technically a three-part question. Where should they go if they have questions about filling out the report? Is there, part two, is there an example of a completed report? And part three, you mentioned a webinar about completing reports. Any idea when that might be scheduled?
Yes, so we will probably do that webinar in 2 weeks. Right now, if you have questions about filling out the C1 and the C2 reports, you can email me, wit@visitnc.com, or you can give me a call, 919-447-7740. I can try and help walk you through it. We don't have examples. Theoretically, no one needs to have that done right now because none of the money was received until October, and you put them in by the 20th of the following month. So the first time anyone would have to do a report to the Pandemic Recovery Office would be November 20th, and that would be the reports for the money you received in October. You theoretically could do a report early if you use the grant for something you've already purchased. Then you've already got all your invoices and receipts and you're ready to go. If you want to do that, I would say call me and I can go over the forms with
you. We have at least one DMO that says they're still waiting to hear if they were approved for round one funds. So their question is, when might they hear and should they reapply as part of round two?
You should hear this week. I think there were only 4 DMOs that we've asked for additional information on the last round. That committee is supposed to meet at some point this week. And then we will let you know by Friday. Fridays are usually the day when we've got all the paperwork done and we send out those offers. If you had already applied, you don't need to do the same application again. You will either qualify or I'll get back to you and say you did not qualify. So I would say if you're waiting, just give us a couple more days or shoot me an email and let me know you're waiting and we'll find out where you are.
Great. One other one, can DMOs apply for projects individually in as much as the totals that are submitted do not exceed the total amount that they're available for?
Yeah, I think so. I think the question is essentially, can you do multiple sort of projects on one application? As long as you don't exceed 30 or 25,000, and that's fine. Yes, as long as they all fit the requirements of the CARES Act.
And at the same time, can you do multiple applications as a way to keep them separate, or as you gather information for each project?
Yeah, you can do that if you want to do multiple applications. It's a little tougher, but yeah, you can do that.
Okay. These funds can be used locally, correct, in terms of promoting the tourism-related businesses to the local community?
Yes, they most definitely can. They're for tourism promotion, so it's not restricted to in-state, out-of-state, in-country, out-of-country. As long as you're doing tourism promotion to help your tourism economy recover, we're not going to tell you what audience you need to talk to. Hopefully you guys know that intimately, and so yes, you can use them for local promotion as well.
Great. And looks like our last question seems that the co-op programs have been very popular and there's a number that's sold out. Are there any plans to add more co-op opportunities, or is the program where it is?
Yeah, the credit program is probably about done where it is. We're trying to assess how we've got that. We've got to get it all spent and used by December 30th. So I would not expect any new openings or opportunities in that. What we really need to do is finalize all those buys and make sure we get people's material in and get that all done by December 30th. So I would think that's probably set for now. Our usual co-op, which runs, of course, the entire fiscal year, is still available and out there, though.
Very nice, gentlemen. That concludes our questions.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us. Thanks, John, for keeping us in the loop on what's going on with commerce, and we appreciate it. And if anybody needs us, give us a call. We won't be doing a webinar next week, but we'll be back in 2 weeks. Thanks, everybody. Have a good one.